Deposits are something I find can bring a lot of confusion to a real estate deal. So I wanted to give you a video that does a breakdown on some of the ins and outs about it to hopefully offer a little bit more clarity. So first thing that you need to know about deposits is that there's no hard and fast rules about amounts and timing. Like all things in a real estate offer, they're negotiable. So there's what's standard and what's commonly accepted and the common practice, and then there's kind of whatever fits your scenario. So let's say, for example, you're buying a house in Kitchener-Waterloo and it's $700,000. Well, it's not uncommon to see a seller that's put in their listing that they're requesting $20,000 to $30,000 deposit. Typically, the deposit is payable within 24 hours of the acceptance of an offer. However, let's say you've got $8,000 available and it's going to take you 2 weeks to get any more money, or you just don't have that kind of cash available right now, then we can absolutely put in the offer $8,000. We can especially write in $8,000 payable within 5 days of the acceptance of the offer. We can play with those numbers any amount you want. You just have to be aware that the further we deviate from what's normal, the kind of tougher the negotiation. If you find yourself in a scenario where you have the funds, just not liquid, not easily available, then you can always tier your deposits. So you could do an offer, hypothetically, that says, we'll pay you $500 to the listing brokerage within the next 24 hours of the offer being accepted. And then in 5 business days, we'll make a further deposit of $25,000. That way, the seller has some assurances, and we can explain that money's tied up here or whatever the circumstances are. One of the biggest strengths of a deposit as a buyer is that it's a way that you can increase the value of your offer without actually paying more in the end. So let's say you're competing with another buyer, or you have maybe a seller that's been a tough negotiator, and they're asking for a $20,000 deposit, but you have $100,000 cash. Well, we can make it a $100,000 deposit, and even though we're not increasing the amount that you end up paying, you might just make your offer that much more attractive to them, because you're really saying, I'm a serious buyer, I'm here to play, I'm not going to back out, I want to buy this house. And you're not actually out any net money at the end of the day. What you really want to be aware of with offers is that they're very time sensitive. It's a legally binding contract that you're signing, and the deposit's a big part of it. So if you have to get the deposit in within 24 hours, in practice, sometimes there's a little wiggle room, but at the end of the day, as a wise person once told me, it's only a problem. It's not a problem until it's a problem. So I like to treat my deposits really strictly. Offer got accepted at 8 p.m. We have 24 hours to get the offer in, unless we describe it differently in the agreement. So I always put into my agreements, that the deposit's payable by 9 p.m. the next business day. That way, if we get an offer accepted on a Saturday night, you're not left scrambling trying to figure out how to get $20,000 to a listing brokerage on a Sunday. Once you submit that deposit, it goes to the listing brokerage. There's a few different ways you can do it. Different brokerages will provide different instructions once your offer is accepted, but typically we're getting a bank draft from your bank and then bringing it either directly to the listing brokerage or depositing it directly into the listing brokerage's trust account. And then if you back out of the agreement based on your conditions that you have within that time frame, then a mutual release gets signed, you get your deposit back in full without deduction. That's the wording. If you decide 2 weeks before closing that you don't want this house anymore, well, now they're probably not going to sign a mutual release, and your deposit's going to be held until there's some sort of agreement or a court order. And there's some myths surrounding deposits here. I don't want to try and get too deep in the legal side of it, but you don't want to make the mistake of thinking that if you back out of a deal, the only thing you're risking is the deposit. If the seller incurs greater damages than the deposit, then there's a good chance they're going to sue you for a greater number. And the flip side's true, that if they end up not having any damages, then maybe you don't lose your full deposit. But it's very circumstantial on exactly how that plays out. And then also just please note when we submit a deposit, there's some compliance measures I have to take, which is I have to identify the person that's delivering the deposit. Typically it's the buyer, but sometimes it's a family or friend. So I have to do a FinTrack report on that person and identify them using legal photo identification. And then we also need to track where did those funds come from, what's the account number, what's the account type, and who's the account holder. So it's all pretty straightforward, but I just want to make sure that you have that information in advance, because it can be a lot of information getting thrown at you when you're making an offer on a property. So sometimes it's nice to think about this stuff in advance.